My name is Georgina, and I'm 17 years old. I used to think that if you worked hard, stayed kind, and didn't cause trouble, life would reward you for it. I believed that until the night my father and stepmother sat me down at the dining table, their faces rehearsed in calm disappointment, and told me I had to pay for my own tuition. The way they said it was almost casual. My stepmother Janet folded her hands neatly, her nails polished a pale pink that matched the silk of her blouse. My father cleared his throat before speaking, the sound bouncing off the silent kitchen walls. Georgina, he said, things have gotten a little tight lately. We can't afford your school anymore. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. What do you mean, can't afford it? I asked. You just renewed my enrollment 3 months ago. Janet jumped in before he could answer. Sweetheart, your father's been under a lot of stress. We've had unexpected expenses. We think it's time you learn a bit of independence. You can stay in school if you find a way to pay your tuition yourself. It felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Independence. I was 17, not 27. You mean get a job? While still in school, I said, half laughing, waiting for one of them to tell me this was a test. But my father didn't smile. He just sighed, rubbing his temples like my reaction was the problem. Look, he said, you can transfer to a public school. It's not the end of the world. I stared at him. Public school. You said Mom wanted me to stay at St. Mary's until graduation. You promised. That word promised made something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, maybe. Or regret. But Janet leaned forward with that overly sweet tone she used when she wanted to sound reasonable. Georgina, it's just a school. You'll make new friends. Besides, this will teach you responsibility. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said quietly, responsibility doesn't mean paying for your parents' choices. Her smile faltered. My father's jaw tightened. I knew that tone crossed the invisible line between being reasonable and being disrespectful. He stood abruptly muttering, that's enough. The conversation ended, but the silence that followed stayed heavy for days. For 3 nights, I barely slept. Every corner of the house felt smaller, tighter. I kept replaying the conversation, trying to make sense of it. My dad had a stable job in IT consulting. We weren't rich, but we'd never struggled before. The bills were paid, the fridge was always full, and Janet had a new piece of jewelry every other week. So why was my education suddenly unaffordable? At breakfast one morning, I brought it up again. Dad, are we in debt or something? He froze, mid-sip of his coffee. Janet didn't even look up from her phone. It's complicated, he said finally. Complicated how? Drop it, Georgina. Janet snapped, her tone cutting. Then softer. You're not the only one we have to think about. That line stung more than it should have. The only one. I wanted to remind her that I wasn't asking for a trip to Paris just to stay in the school that had been my home since middle school. But my father stood brushing off his shirt like the conversation bored him. We're done talking about this. That was the moment something in me broke, not from anger, but from the quiet realization that they had already decided. My opinion, my dreams didn't factor in anymore. Later that week, the cracks in their story started to show. Zach. My stepbrother showed up one evening with a brand new phone, the latest model still gleaming in its box. Alyssa. My stepsister pranced around in a designer hoodie I'd only ever seen on celebrities. They bragged without even realizing it. Mom said it was a reward for good behavior, Alyssa said when I asked where the hoodie came from. She smiled like a cat with cream. I forced a laugh. Good behavior must pay really well around here. They didn't even notice the edge in my voice. That night, I walked past my father's office and saw something that made my stomach twist. He was sitting at his desk, calculator in hand, flipping through a thick folder of receipts. When Janet came in, he closed it quickly, too quickly. I lingered by the doorway unseen. Are you sure about this? She asked in a whisper. He nodded. It's worth it. They'll finally see me as part of the family. Even if it means upsetting Georgina. There was a pause. Then my father's voice softer. She'll understand one day. Understand what? That he was trading my future for her children's approval. Over the next few days, I started noticing small things I'd missed before. New shopping bags hidden in the back seat of Janet's car. Expensive takeout receipts tossed into the trash. Credit card bills left open on the counter before being quickly folded away. The final straw came when I overheard Janet on the phone. Her voice was light, almost giddy. Yes, I know it's expensive, she said, laughing. But we wanted to reward Zach. It's been a rough year for him. He deserves it. Reward. The word echoed in my mind like a taunt. That night, I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked tired, smaller somehow. I wasn't jealous of Zach and Alyssa. I was furious that they lived without consequences, while I was being punished for wanting stability. I thought about my mother the way she used to whisper, "Education is freedom, Georgina. No one can take that from you." But apparently they could. One Friday evening, I found myself scrolling through part-time job listings trying to calculate how many hours I'd have to work to cover even a fraction of tuition. The answer, too many. A few minutes later, a notification popped up on my phone, a group photo posted by Alyssa. She and Zach were out at a new restaurant downtown, the kind with velvet booths and gold accents. The caption read, "Family Night, sponsored by Dad." Something inside me snapped. If there was one thing I was sure of, it was that my father wasn't telling me the truth. I could feel it in every quiet conversation that stopped when I entered a room, in the way Janet's smile stiffened when I asked about money, in the way my dad's eyes darted away when I said I just want to understand. No one was going to give me answers, so I'd find them myself. I waited until the house was silent that night. Then I walked to the living room past the family photos that suddenly felt like props in someone else's story and whispered to the dark, "They think I'll just accept this. They don't know me at all." The refrigerator hummed faintly in the background. Upstairs, a door creaked open, and for a moment I froze, heart pounding. But the sound faded. Somewhere in that house, maybe in Janet's closet, maybe in my father's locked desk drawer, was the truth. And I was done pretending I didn't want to find it. The following weekend started off deceptively calm, almost too calm. Janet hummed while cleaning the kitchen. Zach lounged on the couch, scrolling through his new phone, and Alyssa flitted from mirror to mirror, snapping selfies in yet another new outfit. If you had walked in, you'd think we were the picture of a happy blended family. But underneath the surface, every smile felt like a mask. I watched them all carefully. Every laugh, every offhand comment. Something was wrong, and I was done ignoring it. That afternoon, when Janet was on a call in the backyard, I overheard her again. I know, she said, her voice half laughing. They were expensive, but we wanted them to feel special. It's been hard for the kids since the divorce. Besides, it's only money. Only money. She said it like we were printing it in the basement. Meanwhile, I was being told there wasn't enough to keep me in school. I quietly stepped back before she saw me, the words replaying in my mind. Since the divorce. So that was their justification, throwing gifts at her kids to patch the guilt of a broken marriage. My father had become the ATM of her redemption arc. Friday night came, and Zach and Alyssa arrived. With their usual duffel bags, light half empty, like they always were when they came for the weekend. But on Sunday, when they were packing to leave, I noticed something strange. Their bags looked different, heavier, bulkier, almost bursting at the seams. "Did you guys overpack?" I asked casually, trying not to sound accusatory. Alyssa zipped hers shut too quickly. "We just brought extra stuff this time," she said, eyes darting away. "Extra for what? We didn't even go anywhere." Zach laughed, brushing me off. "Relax, Georgina. Not everything's about you." He slung his bag over his shoulder and walked out. But the way he avoided eye contact told me everything I needed to know. Whatever they were carrying, they didn't want me to see it. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the clock. Midnight. The house was quiet, except for the faint ticking of the hallway clock and the hum of the air conditioner. I couldn't stop thinking about those bags. The way they bulged, the tension in Alyssa's voice, Zach's smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. My heart was pounding, but curiosity won over fear. I tiptoed down the hallway and stopped outside the guest room. The faint moonlight through the curtains gave everything a pale, ghostly glow. I hesitated for a second, then opened the door. The smell of their perfume and deodorant still lingered in the air. On the floor beside the bed sat Zach's duffel bag, half unzipped. The metal zipper glinted like it was daring me to pull it. I crouched down and slowly opened it the rest of the way. My breath caught. Inside were shopping bags, multiple from high-end stores, a new gaming console still in its box, a pair of sneakers worth more than my entire semester's lunch budget. I lifted one shoe. The tag was still attached. I checked Alyssa's bag next. Same thing. Designer clothes, perfume, even a tablet sealed in shrink wrap. It wasn't a coincidence. They weren't bringing things here, they were taking them from here. For a few moments, I just stood there in the dim light, staring down at the proof. My chest ached like I'd swallowed something sharp. This was where my tuition went. My father's "we can't afford it" speech suddenly made perfect sense. The anger came slow, quiet, like a low burn in my stomach. It wasn't even about the stuff, it was about what it meant. I wasn't his priority. I was his afterthought. The next morning, I didn't wait long. As soon as everyone was awake and Zach started lugging his bag toward the door, I said, "What's in there?" He froze. "What?" "Your bag. What's in it?" He frowned, feigning confusion. Clothes, obviously. Really, I folded my arms, because it looked like a Best Buy exploded in there last night. Janet turned from the kitchen sink. Georgina, don't start. No, I think I deserve an answer, I said, my voice trembling, but steady enough to keep going. Dad says we can't afford my tuition, but somehow we can afford what, new phones, consoles, handbags. Alyssa huffed, grabbing her purse. You're being dramatic. Mom and Dad just want us to feel at home. At home, I snapped. So I lose my home, my school, so you can feel comfortable here. Zach muttered something under his breath, something like typical jealous stepkid. That did it. I turned to my father. Is that true? You've been buying them things while telling me we're broke? He hesitated just long enough to confirm it. It's not that simple, he said finally. I'm trying to keep peace in this family. Peace. I almost laughed. Peace doesn't mean bribing them and punishing me. His face hardened. Enough, Georgina. But the damage was done. He knew that I knew. Zach and Alyssa left soon after, and the silence that followed was unbearable. My father sat at the table, his hands pressed against his forehead. Janet stood behind him, her arms crossed, watching me like I was the problem. When they left for errands later that day, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the empty chairs. I thought about every excuse they'd made, every time my dad said it's complicated, every time Janet told me to be grateful. I opened my phone, scrolling through the old text messages from my grandparents the last time they'd sent me money for a birthday or trip, always generous, always kind. A thought hit me. If Dad wasn't using their money for my tuition, where was it going? That was when the idea formed, the only one that made sense. If I couldn't get answers here, I'd go to the only people who might know the truth. My grandparents. They'd always told me, if you ever feel lost, come home. Maybe it was time I did exactly that. As I packed my things for the weekend, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from something deeper, determination. If my father had been lying, I was going to find out just how deep the lie went. And for the first time in weeks, I wasn't scared anymore. I was ready. The morning air was cold enough to sting my cheeks as I stepped off the bus and walked up the narrow path to my grandparents' house. Their front porch light was still on, flickering against the pale sky. I hadn't told them I was coming, but I knew they wouldn't mind. Grandma always said her door was open for family no matter what hour or reason. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, her expression shifted from surprise to concern in seconds. Georgina, honey, what's wrong? That was all it took. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding everything inside until her voice cracked something in me open. I just needed to see you, I said. She pulled me into one of her signature hugs, the kind that felt like armor against everything bad in the world. For a few seconds, I just stood there breathing in the faint scent of her lavender lotion and cinnamon coffee. It felt like safety. We sat in the kitchen, sunlight spilling through the curtains. Grandma poured tea into 2 mismatched mugs. She always said she liked the imperfect pairs. I tried to figure out where to begin. Finally, I blurted it out. Dad and Janet said they can't pay for my school anymore. Her hand paused halfway to her mouth. What? They told me I'll either have to transfer to public school or pay for tuition myself. Grandma frowned. That doesn't make any sense. Your father's job is stable, isn't it? That's what I thought. But lately, things don't add up. I told her about the conversation at dinner, about Zach and Alyssa's new things, about the duffel bags stuffed with expensive clothes and gadgets, about how my dad avoided every question. She didn't interrupt once, just listened, her fingers wrapped around her cup. When I finished, she said quietly, "That doesn't sound right, sweetheart." Grandpa walked in, then adjusting his glasses, drawn by the tension in her voice. What doesn't sound right? Grandma looked at me, waiting for permission. I nodded. She says your father told her he can't afford tuition anymore, she explained, but the stepchildren are living like royalty. Grandpa's brow furrowed. That's strange. We've been sending him money every month. There should be more than enough for her school. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Wait, what? I stammered. You've been sending him money. Of course, Grandma said. Ever since your mom passed away. It started when he lost his job that first year, but even after he went back to work, he asked if we could continue helping, said it was for you. For your education activities, things like that. How much? When she told me, my jaw dropped. It was more than my tuition, more than everything I needed. You've been sending him that much every month. She nodded slowly, her expression darkening, as realization began to settle over her. Why? Has he told you anything about it? I shook my head, my throat tightening. No. He said we couldn't afford anything. The kitchen went quiet except for the faint ticking of the wall clock. Grandpa set his coffee down with a soft thud. That money was meant for you, Georgina, not for Janet's kids, not for anything else. I stared at my hands. The room started to spin slightly, the edges of my vision blurring. So he's been taking money that was supposed to pay for my school and spending it on them. Grandma's jaw clenched. If that's true, your father's been lying to us. To all of us. They pulled out a small wooden file box from the cabinet, the one they use for official things like property papers and old letters. Inside, wrapped neatly in a plastic sleeve, was a contract. This, Grandpa said, is the agreement your father signed when he asked for our help. It states that the funds are to be used solely for your education, healthcare, and basic needs. Any leftover money was to be placed in a savings account for you when you turn 18. I ran my finger over the paper, my name printed neatly at the top, Georgina Ann Miller. It looked so official, so deliberate. Did he ever mention this to you? Grandma asked. I shook my head, the lump in my throat tightening. No, he never even hinted at it. Grandpa sighed heavily. Then he's been breaching this agreement for years. Can you do anything about it? I asked quietly. Oh, we can do plenty, he said. We'll start by finding out where the money's been going. For the rest of the afternoon, the three of us sat together, piecing through what we knew. I mentioned the receipts. I'd seen the things I'd overheard. Grandma took notes. Grandpa made a list. At one point, Grandma said softly, "Do you remember your mom's last letter to us? The one she wrote before her surgery?" I nodded faintly. She asked us to promise we'd always make sure your education came first. That's why we agreed to help. Your father swore he'd protect that. Hearing that nearly broke me. My mother's last wish betrayed for shopping bags and electronics. I felt something shift inside me then. Not just anger, but grief. As the sun began to set, Grandpa stood up and said, "We're going to confront him." My heart jumped. "No, please, he'll get defensive." "He can get defensive all he wants," he replied. "But he's going to answer for this." Grandma placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Honey, this isn't about revenge. It's about doing right by you and by your mother." I nodded, tears threatening to spill. I didn't think he'd go this far. Grandma's expression softened. People do foolish things when they're trying to hold on to something. Maybe he thought he was keeping everyone happy. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the image of those duffel bags burned in my mind. "He didn't just lie," I said quietly. "He chose them over me." Grandma didn't argue. She just squeezed my hand. Before I left that night, Grandpa said, "Georgina, there's something else. You said your father keeps a locked notebook." "Yeah, he writes in it late at night. I saw him once." Grandpa exchanged a glance with Grandma. "That might be important. Keep an eye on it if you can." I nodded. As I walked back toward the bus stop under the dim streetlights, I felt both terrified and strangely calm. Terrified of what would happen when they confronted him, and calm because for the first time, someone was on my side. But I couldn't shake the memory of my father's words. "She'll understand one day." Maybe this was the day I finally did, just not in the way he imagined. The storm hit 2 days later, though not the kind that came with rain. This one arrived with my grandparents' car pulling up in front of our house, quiet but heavy with purpose. I was in my room when I heard the doorbell. Janet's voice floated up the stairs, cheerful and unsuspecting. "Oh, hello. What a surprise." But when she saw who it was, her tone faltered. I crept down the stairs, just far enough to see Grandpa standing tall in the doorway, his expression carved from stone. Grandma was beside him, holding a manila envelope against her chest. My father appeared from his office, adjusting his tie, pretending everything was normal. "What brings you here?" he asked, but the tightness in his voice betrayed him. "Grandpa didn't waste time. We need to talk, now." Janet tried to step in, but Grandma's tone cut through the air like glass. "This is between us and your husband." For a moment, no one moved. Then my father nodded stiffly and led them into the living room. I stayed hidden on the stairs, heart-pounding hands clutching the railing. From where I stood, I could see just enough the way Grandpa sat forward, elbows on his knees, his voice firm but controlled. "We've reviewed the contract," he began, "the one you signed when you agreed to accept our financial support for Georgina." My father's eyes darted to Grandma, then to the envelope. "Contract. Oh, come on. Do we really have to make this into something formal?" "Yes," Grandpa said sharply. "Because you broke it." Janet scoffed. "This is ridiculous. Whatever money you sent, it was for the family. You can't expect him to separate everything like that." Grandpa's glare silenced her. The agreement was crystal clear. The money was for Georgina, her school, her clothes, her care. Not for handbags, not for phones, and certainly not for your children's luxuries. For the first time, my father's voice rose. "You don't understand, Harold. I did what I had to do to keep this household peaceful. Zach and Alyssa didn't ask for any of this. They've had a hard time adjusting. I was trying to make it work. Grandma slammed her palm on the coffee table. At your daughter's expense. He flinched. You think I don't love Georgina? You think I don't care about her education? She's being told to pay her own tuition, Grandma said, her voice trembling with fury, while your stepchildren are drowning in gifts. What do you call that if not neglect? Janet crossed her arms. Maybe if Georgina wasn't so dramatic. Don't, Grandpa warned, his tone low and final. Do not finish that sentence. I gripped the railing tighter. My pulse pounded in my ears. My father leaned back, defeated but defiant. Fine. You want honesty. I thought buying them things would help. I thought if I gave them enough, they'd stop seeing me as the outsider. I just wanted them to accept me. Grandma's voice softened, but it cut even deeper. And in the process, you pushed away the one person who already loved you. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then my father exhaled shakily. I'll make it right. I'll pay it all back. We don't need to involve lawyers. Grandpa stood up slowly. You think this is about money. It's about trust, about integrity. Janet's voice turned shrill. This is harassment. You can't threaten us like this. Grandma turned on her, her patience gone. We're not threatening you. We're holding you accountable. There's a difference. My father ran a hand through his hair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. Please, just give me time. You've had years, Grandpa said. Time's up. When my grandparents left, the house felt like a vacuum. Every sound seemed too loud. The closing of the door, the distant hum of traffic, even my own breathing. I waited a few minutes before coming downstairs. My father sat at the table, head in his hands. Janet paced behind him, muttering curses under her breath. When he finally looked up and saw me, his face twisted with exhaustion. You told them, didn't you? The guilt hit hard, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. They had a right to know. A right, he laughed bitterly. Do you realize what you've done? They could ruin us over this. Us, I said quietly. You mean ruin you. Don't talk to me like that, he snapped. You think you understand everything, but you don't. I was trying to protect this family. By lying to all of us, by keeping things from exploding, he said, slamming his palm on the table. You don't know what it's like, Georgina. You don't know how hard it is to keep everyone happy. I stared at him, my voice barely above a whisper. Maybe that's the problem. You've been too busy keeping them happy to notice how unhappy I've been. He didn't respond. Janet put a hand on his shoulder, glaring at me. You should be ashamed of yourself, young lady. After everything your father's done. Everything he's done, I interrupted. You mean stealing money from my grandparents or lying to me about it? Her eyes went cold. You've turned into a very ungrateful girl. I almost laughed. Maybe I finally learned from the best. That night, the house stayed silent, except for the sound of my father pacing in his office. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, trying to decide whether to cry or scream. But no tears came. The next morning, Grandma called. We met with our lawyer, she said. We're moving forward. There are legal grounds to reclaim the money. Legal grounds, I repeated. You mean like an actual lawsuit? Yes, this isn't just a family argument anymore. For a second, I couldn't breathe. It felt unreal, like I was watching someone else's life unravel. He's still my dad, I whispered. I know, Grandma said softly, and that's why this hurts so much. After we hung up, I sat by my window watching the sunrise paint the sky in pale pink and gray. It should have been beautiful, but all I could feel was hollow. My father texted me later that evening. Dad, I'm sorry. Please don't let them do this. They're overreacting. Dad, we can fix this, just you and me. Don't you want our family to stay together? I stared at the messages, the familiar manipulation disguised as love. Then, without hesitation, I blocked his number. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the storm. It was only the eye. The silence after blocking my father's number didn't bring peace, just a different kind of ache. The kind that lingers in your chest, whispering that maybe you've gone too far, that maybe you should have tried one more time. But every time that thought crept in, I remembered the look in his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, just fear of being caught. For a few days, things were strangely quiet. My grandparents handled the legal process. I focused on school, pretending I was fine, but it didn't last. On a Wednesday afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Georgina. His voice, low, shaky, trying too hard to sound calm. I almost hung up, but something in me needed to hear what he'd say. I just want to talk, he said. I know I messed up. I know you're angry. I can fix this. I didn't respond. He continued, words tumbling out faster. I shouldn't have lied, but you have to understand things got complicated. Janet was pressuring me. The bills were piling up. Stop! My voice came out sharper than I intended. You told me there was no money for school. Meanwhile, you were buying them everything they wanted. He sighed. I know how it looks. No, you don't, I said, finally standing up from my bed, pacing. Because if you did, you'd realize this isn't about how it looks. It's about what it means. You took what was meant for me, Mom's legacy, and spent it on people who will never see you as family. There was silence. Then his tone changed, softening like a salesman offering a deal. Georgina, listen to me. If you just talk to your grandparents, get them to drop this. I'll pay them back. I'll make it right. The manipulation was familiar, the guilt wrapped in fake sincerity. You're not sorry, I said quietly. You're scared. He hesitated. That's not fair. What's not fair is you calling me now because you're cornered. Not when I was begging you to explain, not when I cried over losing my school. Only now. There was a pause, then his voice dropped to a whisper. You're my daughter. Doesn't that mean anything to you? My throat tightened. It used to. I hung up. That night I told my grandparents about the call. Grandpa listened, without interrupting. When I finished, he just said, he's not trying to make things right. He's trying to make them go away. Grandma nodded. And you can't be the one to clean up after him. Not this time. Her words lingered in my mind like a protective spell. But the next morning my phone buzzed again. Another text from him, this time a long one. Georgina, I mean it, this time. I'll start therapy, family counseling. We can rebuild, I promise. Just tell them to stop the lawsuit. I can't lose everything over one mistake. For a moment I wanted to believe him. I imagined a version of my dad who meant those words. The one who used to braid my hair before school, who taught me how to ride a bike, who said, "You're my whole world, kiddo." But that version didn't exist anymore. Or maybe he never really did. I typed back. If you want to fix things, start by telling the truth. Not to me, but to yourself. Then I put my phone down and didn't look at it again for hours. 2 days later, my grandparents called me over. When I arrived, Grandpa's face was grave, and Grandma had a folder in front of her. We found out what he's really been doing, she said quietly. My stomach dropped. What do you mean? Grandpa opened the folder. Inside were copies of financial statements, transfers, emails, all tied to my father. The money wasn't just going to Janet and the kids, Grandpa explained. He's been investing it. Investing in what? Grandma hesitated before saying it. A business venture. Some kind of startup he was trying to launch. I frowned. He never mentioned anything about starting a business. That's because it wasn't legitimate, Grandpa said. It's a front, a multi-level marketing scheme. He poured tens of thousands into it thinking it'd make him rich. But it's been failing for months. I sank into the chair. So, he took my money to gamble on a scam. Grandma nodded slowly. He said he was doing it for you, to secure your future. The words twisted in my gut. I almost laughed, the kind of bitter laugh that hides heartbreak. He's unbelievable. Grandpa clenched his jaw. He's desperate. And when desperate men try to fix their mistakes, they usually make worse ones. I didn't know whether to cry or scream. I'd expected greed, favoritism, but this was delusion. He didn't lose the money trying to help the family, I said quietly. He lost it trying to prove he could be someone he's not. Grandma reached for my hand. Honey, you can't carry his choices. You did nothing wrong. But it didn't feel that way. It felt like I'd been part of his lie just by being his daughter. That night, I sat on my bed with the lights off, staring at my phone. Then, without thinking too hard, I opened our old chat and sent one last message. I know everything about the business, the money, all of it. You didn't do it for me. You did it for yourself. I love you, but I can't keep letting you drag me down with you. He replied an hour later. You don't know the full story. Don't judge me until you do. That was the last message I ever got from him. I didn't block him this time. I wanted him to see when I stopped replying, to understand that silence wasn't avoidance, it was finality. When I told my grandparents the next morning, Grandpa nodded with quiet approval. Sometimes he said the only way to win with people who won't take responsibility is to stop playing their game. I didn't say anything, but inside something settled. It wasn't peace, not yet, but it was the start of it. The days that followed felt eerily still, like the air right after a storm. The shouting was gone. The texts stopped, and the house I'd once called home became nothing more than a memory that ached when I thought too hard about it. My grandparents told me the legal process was moving forward. Their lawyer had already sent formal notice to my father about reclaiming the funds and investigating the misuse. I didn't ask for updates beyond that. I didn't want to know how ugly it would get. I just wanted it over. At school, I kept my head down. My friends asked why I'd been gone for a few days, but I just said family stuff. What could I even tell them? That my dad gambled away money meant for my education, that he lied again and again and then tried to guilt me into fixing it. No one would believe that the man who used to pack my lunches and cheer from the bleachers could also be the same one who betrayed me so completely. One evening, I stayed late in the library trying to lose myself in homework. When I finally got home to my grandparents' place, Grandma was waiting for me at the table with 2 mugs of cocoa, the same way she had on the night everything started. "Long day?" she asked gently. "Just heavy," I admitted. "It feels like I've lost everything." She smiled softly. "You didn't lose everything, sweetheart. You found the truth. That's something most people spend their whole lives running from." I stared into the cocoa. "It doesn't feel like much of a reward." "I know," she said. "But truth has a way of cleaning the wound before it heals. It stings now because it's working." Her words sank in slowly. For the first time, I realized she wasn't just talking about the lawsuit, she was talking about me. A week later, my father tried calling again. This time, he didn't hide behind an unknown number. The screen flashed his name like an echo from another life. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail instead. His voice was quiet, worn down. "Georgina, I know I've done wrong. I never meant for things to get this far. I just wanted to build something for us. I thought if I could prove myself to Janet, to her kids, to you, then maybe I'd feel like I wasn't a failure. I guess I became one anyway. I'm sorry." I listened twice. The first time I felt nothing. The second time I cried, not because I forgave him, but because I finally accepted that he was never going to be the father I'd built in my mind. I didn't delete the voicemail. I didn't respond either. Some things are better left as they are unfinished, but honest. Weeks turned into a month. The lawsuit was still pending, but the lawyer was confident my grandparents would recover some of the lost money. They even promised to cover my tuition until everything settled. On the first morning I returned to St. Mary's, the campus looked different. Not physically, but in how it felt. The place that had once been my second home now felt like proof that I could survive even when everything else collapsed. As I walked through the courtyard, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't angry anymore, not at my father, not even at Janet. I was tired, but not bitter. Maybe that was its own kind of victory. That night, back at my grandparents' house, I sat by the window with a notebook open in front of me, a blank page waiting. For a long time, I didn't write anything. Then slowly, I began to jot down everything I'd learned, not about them, but about myself, about trust, boundaries, what it means to let go. Halfway through the page, I paused. My reflection in the window stared back at me. Dad used to keep a locked notebook. He filled it with secrets, excuses, half-truths that he thought would protect him. I realized I was doing the opposite. My notebook wasn't for hiding, it was for understanding. He built walls with words. I was going to build bridges. Later that evening, Grandpa passed by the door and noticed me writing. "Getting it all out?" he asked. "Trying to," I said. He nodded. "Good. Just remember, forgiveness isn't saying what he did was okay. It's deciding not to let it own you anymore." I smiled faintly. "I think I'm getting there." He chuckled, patting my shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, kiddo. Your mother would be proud." That line broke me a little, but in a good way, because for the first time in a long time, I believed it might be true. Before bed, I reread the last thing I wrote in the notebook. He kept secrets to protect himself. I tell the truth to protect my peace. I closed the book, turned off the light, and let the quiet settle around me. Outside, the wind rustled through the trees, not the storm that had once torn through my life, but a gentle breeze, the kind that comes when something has finally passed. Maybe this wasn't the ending I'd imagined, but it was mine, and that was enough.